And then right like 2 days after that, that's when we start to see a very concerning sign where whales and sharks are now dumping. Retail is going crazy. Like they're really accumulating hard. Um, and then right about a week ago, it started to get a little better. But this, as we just saw on the other chart, whales and sharks are still dumping.
Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me today is Brian from Santiment. And as you all know, we are going to do a deep dive into the metrics around Bitcoin and all the top altcoins to get an idea of what's happening in this market and what may happen next. Brian, great to have you.
Good to be here, Tony. Markets are still kind of in the doldrums right now compared to where we were last month, but at least we're gaining some steam as of the day of our recording here.
Yeah, it's still a chop, right? It's still up and down, swings both ways, longs and shorts getting liquidated. It's like this weird, nasty game that's happening. But, as a macro investor and a long-term investor, I'm trying my best to ignore this stuff. And of course, I'm curious what the data is telling us. So maybe we could start with Bitcoin, as far as sentiment and how people are feeling.
Yeah, let's take a look. It's definitely been a wild ride. When we checked in 2 weeks ago, we were seeing some hints of decline from whales. And we'll start with just some raw returns because things look pretty good as of the past 7 days. November started off with some pretty big scares across markets. Bitcoin did actually dip below 100K, getting as low as 98.9K before rebounding, dipping again, and now showing some signs of life, trying to make its way back to 105K. As of now, it's at about 103.3K, up about 1.7% over the past 7 days. Ethereum doing a little better, trying to regain that $3,500 support. But the big stories have been some of the mid-tier, large/mid-tier altcoins. Dogecoin getting back up 10% over the past week, Cardano 8%. Chainlink 8%, ZCash being a big story. Maybe we'll see if there's time for us to check really quickly on the sentiment metric for ZCash because it's been fascinating to see the polarizing opinions. It's up something like 70-ish% over the past month, despite the rest of markets just getting flushed down the toilet. So the sentiment, when I last checked a week ago or so, was looking super bearish. So just non-believers everywhere we looked and people kind of memeing the people who were FOMOing into Zcash and trying to ride up the wave and everyone kind of calling them suckers. But as we know, when the mass narrative is to make fun of the people that are buying into a trend happens, those people making fun actually get screwed over and they watch the trend continue until they end up getting converted and they're like, all right, I guess I need to jump into Zcash too. And that's when Zcash ends up usually turning around. So I'm interested to see whether that point has happened yet.
Yeah, this is definitely something to watch because to your point, it's kind of an anomaly versus everything else that's happening in the market. And
Yep.
it's blasting out, making new highs and much more. So it's very interesting.
Exactly. And the other big anomalies were Polkadot going up about the same, 26% the past week. World Liberty Financial, got to give it to Trump and the team. They're just continuing to see their coin uh, pump up just week after week, up 34% the past 7 days. And then finally, Near up almost 45% in the past 7 days. So there's still plenty of coins that are making savvy traders some money, basically looking in places that the mainstream crowd isn't.
Very interesting. Um, with regards to Bitcoin MVRV, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, let's start there. I'm going to find the right tab. Here we go. So MVRV, as most of you know, measures the average trading returns of anyone active over a certain period of time. So this would be the 30-day MVRV. This would be the 365-day MVRV. Typically, we like to see both of them under zero, indicating that the coin is undervalued relative to the zero-sum game that a coin trades around at all times. So The good news is both are under that 0% mark, with the 30-day MVRV at about negative 6.5% now, 365-day just under at about negative 3%. So ideally, this is the kind of setup we're looking for. And we really haven't seen both lines in the negative range here uh, in any other point over the past 6 months outside of maybe this very tiny dip here in mid October, which was a very good time to buy in hindsight. So now here we are. We saw, as I mentioned, the price go below 100K toward the beginning of November. Can't remember if it was the third or fourth, but we are still showing that the average returns are in the negative range for short term and long term traders. So if you were to buy now or add on to your position, you'd be doing so at a lesser risk compared to the average point in Bitcoin's 17 plus year history. So I like the look of it. Neither one of them are in like an extreme buy zone, but they're both at least below 0%, which is mathematically a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, I can't recall when was the last time I saw that 365 day below that line. We've seen the 30-day, dip below that line. So it's very interesting
Yep.
to see that playing out. And to your point, if you're going according to the data, could be a great buying opportunity. Obviously, not financial advice.
Exactly. And to answer that question, it looks like the last time was that first/second week of April when Trump made
Tariff.
those initial tariff announcements, which will
Mm.
be maybe we can segue into that really quick and look at how sensitive the topic of tariffs are right now.
It's,
Um,
especially if Brian, we might be getting the tariff dividend stimmy checks, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Maybe what I'll do. So these blue bars are just the overall mentions of the word tariff combined with tariffs. Uh, and as of now, we did see a big spike. I presume when this was announced a couple of days ago, Sunday, Saturday, something like that. And so people started to hear about those stimulation. What are they called? Stimulation checks. Um,
Stimulus.
Stimulus. Thank you.
Although Trump is saying dividend checks, but it's stimulus. So
Yeah, exactly. So I mix up the words myself. So stimulus or checks, we'll just put those here. And sure enough, that same spike happened on November 9th, right when we saw a bit of a jump in tariff discussions. So people are very keen to the fact that that's happening here in the US right now. And the initial reaction, almost as predicted, would be price goes up a little bit and then there's a bit of a letdown.
hmm,
Um, we did get all the way up to about 106.5K or so yesterday before dropping. But, you know, I think this is kind of a net wash. Most of the next big wave, I think, is going to come down to that third and final FOMC decision, which will be coming up in about 2 to 3 weeks or so. And from there, we'll really see how the market reacts to the, will they or won't they question mark that we're all kind of on the edge of our seats for.
yeah, I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, I don't know, I never got my Doge check or whatever it is, and so they're not certain if this is going to happen. But I feel if it does happen, it could add fuel to a rally. If there is a rally where you have retail, many of them are going to put their money into the markets, kind of like what we saw during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, we only have a few instances in history as to how these stimulus checks played out for crypto, and it's logically, the people with expendable income who don't need those stimulus checks for immediate living expenses are going to pour them into more speculative investment decisions like crypto. So
Hmm.
I guess the question is how many people have expendable income now versus 5 years ago when those stimulus checks were rolling in.
Yeah, yeah, good point. I'm curious what the whales are doing because Brian, I have been looking at the whale wallet numbers, and that's been on the decline. So that has me a little bit alarmed.
Yeah, and that has not really changed. We'll go last 6 months. We're still declining, which is a little alarming. We haven't seen this level of sustained dumping by key stakeholders um, really since April, that first week of April, when even the whales were getting concerned by some of the tariff news that was coming out. But here we are. We got the Fed rate interest rate cut happening here at the end of April, the 29th or so. And even after that, you've seen the whales just continue to dump. That would be represented by this bright green line. Overall, they've dumped about 0.4% of the entire supply over the past 4 weeks, whereas retail has added a very small amount because they just don't own that much. But if you just look at it from what they owned before versus now, the key stakeholders own about 0.6% less than 4 weeks ago, and the tiny little retail traders own about 0.75% more. So, how does that matter, you may ask? Well, I'm going to segue really quick into an insight I just wrote last night. And it was kind of an extensive study. It might be a little in the weeds, but I'll just give you the cliff notes. This picture here, I can get it a little bigger. That's about as maxed out as it gets. This picture has a 5-color scale, and the scale is basically green to red. It should be pretty intuitive. Green is good. That means it's the ideal setup where key stakeholders are accumulating, and the micro stakeholders, which are like 0.01 BTC or less, are dumping. So we're looking at the total amount held by 10 to 10K wallets, the whales and sharks who own a little over 2/3 of the entire supply, versus the micro stakeholders who barely even own 0.25% of the supply, but they're still representative of the retail/crowd's mood. And that's why they matter here. So ideally, what we're looking for are conditions where that green line's going up and the red line's going down, meaning whales are accumulating from the tiny little wallets that are panic selling. The opposite, the worst case, would be if the key stakeholders are dumping and the micro stakeholders are accumulating. So you get the idea. It goes from best to worst down here. So what I did was I looked at the last year of data. I didn't look at every single tiny little up and down movement. I looked at kind of the main trends. So whenever there was a big change, and I'll just go through a few of them. We'll just start here, like right after the tariff stuff was starting to recover. So you can see here in yellow, this is when the key stakeholders were kind of moving up and down, and so were retail as they were trying to react to everything Trump was saying about, 120% on China, this, never mind, we'll put it on pause. So nobody knew what to do here. And these green bars, which you can faintly see behind the bright colors, I know it's not a perfect view, but you can see everything. You can see how prices kind of declined a little bit. And then all of a sudden, we see this trend here starting right around April 13th. Can I make this one bigger? Yes, I can. That's even better. Okay. April 13th, bright green line starts to go way up here. So key stakeholders begin to accumulate. And what do you know? Look at what prices are doing as retail is dumping like crazy. Retail is basically going on X and Reddit and Telegram and saying, don't buy into it. Trump's going to come out with more tariff news soon, and he's going to plunge markets, market manipulation, this and that. So retail is spamming all this bearish stuff, and they're selling off. So they're staying true to what they're speaking about and selling off their coins here. And the whales and sharks are going, okay, we'll take your coins. We'll go ahead and continue to accumulate from all the smaller wallets out there. And the price rally just exploded almost immediately over that next month. And then we see a weird moment where whales go up a little bit. They're moving down here and then they go up. But retail also starts to say, okay, now I need to start buying in again. Clearly, we're in a bull market again. And that's when prices move back down. Then they start to take profit again, retail does, and whales continue to accumulate. Price didn't really do much during this segment. You get the idea. I'm not going to go through every single one of these. This was our big red zone here, where you start to see a tipping point after the then all-time high in mid-July. Whales and sharks are clearly starting to dump here, while retail is trying to buy every dip. That's bad. We don't want to see that kind of combination happening. So prices are starting to decline. One more little pickup, one more decline. You get the idea. This was our last green zone from mid September to early October. And that's when we had our last all time high, right around October 6th. And then, right like 2 days after that, that's when we start to see a very concerning sign where whales and sharks are now dumping. Retail is going crazy. Like they're really accumulating hard. And then, right about a week ago, it started to get a little better. But this, as we just saw on the other chart, whales and sharks are still dumping, even though retail is at least more flat now and they're not in super FOMO mode. This green line still matters the most. And we need to see whales and sharks begin to accumulate again because history shows, based on this correlative color coding chart I put together, most of the time, you know, this is correct. When key stakeholders are accumulating and micro stakeholders are dumping, that's when you see prices going crazy. And when the opposite's true, that's when prices tend to decline. And it was very true during this last red zone. And it's still kind of looking a little hazy here when we're in an orange zone, which is basically a 2 out of 5 on the bullish scale.
Yeah, I'm hoping these trends flip, Brian, that retail starts panicking again for whatever reason. And, the whales start accumulating because one of the things I was looking at, I zoomed back out to Q2 of 2024 when you had the big buy the rumor, sell the news event for the
Hmm.
Bitcoin ETF launch. And you see a big, massive sell off there. And it took a while for the market to pick back up. Now, it didn't mean the bull market was over, but at this stage in the market, if they keep dumping, it could be a signal that the bull market's over. But, we'll have to wait and see. We unfortunately don't have a crystal ball.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, prices have kind of gotten to where they are through the huge injected capital from, BlackRock and some of these big institutions that pour money in MicroStrategy. But we don't realize that as soon as they start to pull out some of their money, there's just the whole foundation of what got us to the prices we got to start to get threatened. And the tipping point can be at any moment because suddenly it's the mid tiers and the low tier traders that have to prop up prices and they just don't have the capital for that. So like you said, um, whether it's this year or looking at previous years, when you see this hesitance from institutionals and whales and sharks to continue to put money in, it becomes apparent how quickly things can collapse. And I'm not going to say based on this trend alone that we're about to see some crash. We can't predict the future, but we do typically see prices start to fade if the millionaires and the billionaires out there decide they want to take a breather from crypto.
What are open interests looking like for Bitcoin?
Yeah, great question. So we're going to look at the past 6 months of open interest data for Bitcoin. And generally, when this blue line is going up, that's a sign that, um, those leveraged and margin uh, trades are getting more and more prevalent and people are taking more risks. But with those higher risks, that typically means we're more prone to collapse because it's a lot of longs out there that are typically getting higher and higher. And when you see them um, especially above this line here or so, as we saw 2, 3, 4 times or so, even if we move it down here, so we can include this one. These are the times where it's just a little bit too high, like above 40 billion or 40, yeah, 40 billion, not trillion. $40 billion in open interest it seems to be the threshold where we see a collapse whenever that happens.
Hmm.
And it happened here, here, sort of here, and here, and here. So right now we're starting to go up a little bit, and that's a little bit concerning. Consider 40 billion to be kind of the more recent danger zone. Um, I'm interested to see just how greedy people can get without Bitcoin really able to rally and get above even 105K, 110K recently. It seems like people are really trying to buy any dip they can, which is a little bit of a concern. And we want to see open interest kind of stay low like it did back in June when nobody really knew what was going on with the tariffs still. And then all of a sudden we get that explosion and then the open interest happens. So that's what I'm seeing there.
Interesting. So you mentioned that $40 million mark has been kind of the ceiling, so to speak, or it triggered.
Billion, yeah.
Oh, billion, excuse me. Interesting. Okay. I wonder why that is that number, but
I mean, it's pretty arbitrary. There's no reason that that number, that round number, is some sort of top. But just
mm,
based on the last, call it 6 months or so, that tends to be around the part where we're getting a signal that the greed is getting a little too prevalent. So I just kind of look at it that way, I'd say.
got it, got it. That makes sense. Can we look at Ethereum, social, trends there, and then MVRV?
Yeah, let's look at sentiment. So while we're here, Bitcoin, by the way, did see a big greed spike. That was when we were starting to rally, and then it calmed down after a top happened. So, as usual, when you see these big greed spikes where
Hmm.
there's like a significant amount of positive comments compared to negative comments, that tends to be when tops occur. It's pretty reliable. And if we switch to Ethereum, it should look pretty similar. Huge greed spike, way, way bigger actually than Bitcoin. If you look at the top left of my screen while I'm hovering over this particular candle,
Hmm.
it's saying that there were about 3.2 bullish comments for every one bearish comment on the 9th. And this was when we saw those stimulus check announcements and some of the tariff news. So people reacted positively. And this probably is similar for a lot of different altcoins out there where people tried to buy a lot of dips for the more speculative assets. Not that Ethereum's speculative, but I know the deeper we would go, if we even went to meme coins, there'd be a lot of big bullish spikes on this day as well.
Oh, absolutely. Hmm. And I guess to your point around this stimulus check announcement, possibly government reopening, I guess people started getting a bit bullish, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Mm.
anything that allows investors to suddenly get gifted some more dry capital um, and dry powder. I think typically leads to enthusiasm about you know being able to pour more money into those speculative investments out there that they've been hoping they could buy dips more on. I just think a lot of people in general are out of dry powder because, especially since the October 6th all time high for Bitcoin, so many altcoins have looked like this. Ethereum is still down 26% over the past 5 weeks or so. So, so many dips have been bought along the way down here that, hearing that suddenly there's another, four-figure check coming their way is like a breath of fresh air for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. And then Ethereum MVRV, what is that looking like?
So, pretty similar to Bitcoin. Actually, the long term is still a bit higher than Bitcoin. It's about break even right now. Short term, though, negative 7.5%. That's a nice, juicy MVRV that could suggest that a dip buy is logical here. It got all the way down on November 4th when we dipped almost below $3,000. You can see on the top left of my screen, it got all the way down to like negative 21%. And really anything below like negative 15 is like an extreme buy zone in most cases. Like you can see here, great dip buy spot, great dip buy spot here, really great dip buy spot back here. So most of these times when the orange line gets below negative 15, that's like a telltale signal that you can at least temporarily take advantage of and go long and make some profit because there's so much retail pain out there. Average wallets are just getting brutalized anytime the MVRV is showing such a low figure here.
Hmm. It's very much like a Bitcoin right now, where it's both. Well, the 365 is right above there,
Break even,
but
yeah.
yeah, but it's like they're both on a decline, which is good,
Hmm.
unless it's the top of the market. That's right, and we're wrapping it up. But obviously, this is just one factor, but it could be a great entry point.
Yeah, exactly. And really, the more a coin has been struggling, the deeper down you should see those MVRVs. I'm curious how XRP looks.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's actually not because of the fact that it had such a huge spike back here in mid July. There's still so much profit from some wallets that the MVRV, even after this long decline, going back almost 4 months now, the price has dropped a little, about 32% since then. So you would think that the MVRV is even lower, but this was just such a strong rise that there may need to be just a tiny bit more pain, even though long term, we at Santiment believe in XRP just like we do with Ethereum and Bitcoin. I know some people think we have something against XRP. We've just been seeing signals not quite look bullish enough to suggest like a big dip buy. And so far, we've been kind of right. It's every episode we have, Tony. We talk about how XRP still has so much profit here. And it's finally at least at that point where they're both in the negative range.
Mm.
As you can see, they were a week ago. That was when there was a nice dip buy opportunity. And prices did jump since last week about 10% or so. So we are at least on the upswing, and the MVRVs are suggesting we could still be on an upswing. It's just not quite as bullish of a signal as it is for Bitcoin and Ethereum. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because you mentioned how overextended it was earlier this year, and sometimes it takes a while for the sentiment, like if there's still greed out there,
Yeah.
and to reset, it needs to get to fear, and then you see maybe the next rally. It's the cyclical aspect of this market, right?
Exactly. Well said.
So as far as sentiment for XRP, any spikes, or are people feeling a bit? I know Ripple had their swell conference recently. There were some
Yep.
announcements, so I'm curious.
Yeah. Like we said on the 9th, most altcoins had this big bullish spike because of the stimulus checks.
Mm.
I don't know when that conference happened exactly. The last big bullish spike we saw was back on about 2-ish weeks ago. Since then, though, it's been kind of up and down. I
Mm.
don't see too much out of the ordinary for XRP.
Well, I guess that's good, right? If we're looking for the bottom, so to speak, or a local bottom before a next major rally, it's good. We don't want to see too much greed from a
Yeah.
sentiment standpoint.
The best outcome or best setup is if you personally are bullish on something, but the rest of the crowd thinks the exact opposite. Um, I know it seems like that shouldn't be the case, but time after time, like we've seen when the vocal majority is extremely bullish on something, like they were here, that on September 18th or so, that's when you want to get out. And when they're extremely bearish, like they were on the 10th or 11th when Trump had that temporary announcement of tariffs, that's when you want to get in. And you don't want to be going along with whatever your trading groups and the big gurus on X and Reddit and Telegram are telling you. You want to follow your own path and hope that everyone else thinks that that coin that you like is a poor investment.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, you got to use data like this, right? Which you guys provide to navigate, and not the feelings, not the emotions, not the hype from the crowd and all that, but what is the data actually saying? Because sometimes you may be just seeing a sliver of things, and you can misjudge the market. But if you're getting an aggregate, like this is pulling in, it's better to base your decisions on the data, so you're more informed.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So I guess, Brian, I don't know, maybe we can look at the sentiment for Zcash, since that's been going bonkers.
Yes. Thanks for reminding me. So for Zcash, like I said, you got a price rally that looks absolutely parabolic for the
Yeah.
last, call it month and a half or so, 6-7 weeks. But where's the sentiment excitement? Why is the sentiment over the past 2 weeks going like this, or even the past 4 weeks looking like this, but the price is just like going nuts? I mean, even with this, I get that it's actually been on a pretty big retrace just in the last 24 hours or so. It's down 23%, which is pretty staggering. If we go back to the top 4 days ago, it's down about 30%. So yeah, I get that it's retracing, and it makes sense that over the last 4 days or so, sentiment's going to decline, but it never really got super euphoric. Maybe there was this big spike at the very bottom. Um, but outside of that, like as soon as the rally started, it's just nothing but non-believers across our timelines for people going like, don't fall for Zcash. It's just an ancient dinosaur coin that's been around for a decade. It doesn't do anything special. Try this coin instead if you like privacy. That's all I've been seeing, and I'm sure it's similar for you, Tony.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people fading Zcash, and a lot of people are sidelined, and crypto is so tribal. If their coin is not pumping and something else is pumping, people start getting upset. But I've seen in this market, every dog has its day, and I don't think people recognize that, right? And sometimes even the coins you haven't heard about for a long time, they don't have a ton of social mentions. They start waking up, depending on what the whales and market makers are doing,
Yeah,
and you can I often remind people, you can't it's not possible to hold every coin, like it's
yeah,
so sometimes people are like, oh man, and they start FOMOing, and I'm like, it's not possible to hold every coin. You got to take your bets, and be patient, and don't go crazy and FOMO and get jealous about another coin that's pumping.
exactly. I mean, this even happened to Ethereum, the number two asset in crypto. Um, about a year ago, we were
Yep.
having a video, and I was like, Tony, I don't know why, but everyone suddenly just hates Ethereum and they think that this underperformance is going to last forever. And that's telling me that we're going to at least see some sort of relief rally for a few months. And suddenly Ethereum doubles over the span of like 2, 3, 4 months in the middle of this year. And suddenly people forgot about how bearish the average Joe was toward Ethereum just 1 year ago.
And I remember it's same thing for XRP. There were a lot of people saying, I see the SEC is not going to end the
Yep.
lawsuit. It's going to drag out. This coin sucks. So it's almost like, Brian, when the sentiment flips to anger and fear against a coin, then the market does the opposite of which we've talked about. That's been like a macro theme, right?
Yeah. Like 9 out of 10 times. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not perfect. There's going to be those exceptions where the news actually is that big of a deal.
Right.
But most of the time, those news headlines are just there to sway you a bit. And the media has a lot of control over how big of a deal they choose to make some of these stories. Or even Trump and the White House themselves, say what you will, whether you're pro or anti-Trump, like they are going to decide how sensationalized a story is going to be. Some people believe the tariffs are completely manufactured for market manipulation. I'm going to keep my opinion, and you can keep your opinion out of that. But um, depending on how the market reacts, Trump and the administration are going to pay attention to that and then adjust accordingly to, how much things go down or up because they don't want to freak people out too much. And a lot of these media fabricated stories or just sensationalized stories are there to cause some chaos to an extent. And they do.
Oh, absolutely. And it's crazy times, man. And Brian, as always, I hope next time we meet, we're in better market conditions where things are on the rise again. and
Same.
and we end the year maybe with a major rally, but fingers crossed. There's no guarantees there, folks. And we got to continue to look at the data and see what happens. And hopefully, the key thing that I'm watching is the whale wallets, right, for Bitcoin, that starts plateauing and reversing.
Right. That's my number one signal I'm watching right now. I definitely recommend following what the whales and sharks are doing. And, 2 weeks from now, we might be uh, prepping for Thanksgiving with some good news for everybody. So
For sure. Thank you so much, Brian.
cheers. Thank you.